Clara Hughes was born on September 27, 1972, in Winnipeg, Canada, and her early years were marked by both promise and struggle, a combination that would later shape her into one of the most remarkable athletes and advocates the world has ever seen. Growing up, Clara did not appear destined for greatness. In fact, she often described her younger self as someone who felt lost, disconnected, and uncertain about life. Her household environment was difficult, with her father struggling with alcoholism, and that instability left a deep mark on her. As a teenager, Clara found herself veering into a destructive lifestyle, skipping school, experimenting with drugs and alcohol, and wandering without a clear sense of purpose. She was on the verge of becoming another lost young soul when a twist of fate intervened. One day, while watching television, she caught a glimpse of the 1988 Calgary Winter Olympics, specifically the speed skating events. Clara later described how she was instantly captivated by the power, grace, and determination of the athletes on the ice. It was as if a spark had been ignited deep within her, showing her that life could be different, that there could be something greater to strive for beyond the shadows of her struggles. Inspired by what she saw, Clara decided to give sports a chance, even though at that time she was far from the disciplined, focused figure she would eventually become. She began cycling first, almost by accident, joining a local program where coaches quickly noticed her natural strength and endurance. The bike became both an outlet and an escape, a way to channel her restless energy into something positive. Clara discovered a capacity for relentless training, and though she was far from polished, she had grit, a quality that impressed her mentors. As she trained more seriously, she also began experimenting with speed skating, drawn back to that magical image from the Calgary Olympics that had stirred her imagination. At first, the ice was unforgiving, and she fell often, but the determination that had once kept her surviving through hardship now pushed her to rise again and again, each fall becoming a lesson rather than a defeat. By the early 1990s, Clara was making a name for herself in Canadian sports, particularly in cycling, where her powerful legs and immense stamina gave her an edge in long-distance road races. She stunned many by qualifying for the 1996 Summer Olympics in Atlanta, where she represented Canada with courage and determination. Against the odds, she won 2 bronze medals in cycling, becoming one of the few Canadians at that time to stand on the Olympic podium for the sport. The victory was more than just athletic success, it was a statement to herself and to the world that she had turned her life around, that the girl who once seemed lost in despair had found a path of resilience and excellence. Yet even as the medals hung around her neck and the Canadian flag waved in her honor, Clara struggled with something darker beneath the surface. The pressure of elite sports, combined with unresolved pain from her past, led her to battle depression, though she kept it hidden. Outwardly, she smiled for cameras and celebrated her victories, but inwardly she felt heavy and often disconnected, unable to fully enjoy the moments she had worked so hard to achieve. She pushed herself into even more training, as if trying to outrun the feelings she couldn't yet name. But Clara's journey was never about perfection, it was about persistence, about facing challenges and finding ways through them. After Atlanta, she decided to return more seriously to speed skating, inspired by the possibility of competing not just in the Summer Games but also in the Winter Olympics. The transition was not easy, the disciplines were vastly different, and Canada already had a long history of world-class skaters. Many doubted whether she could succeed on the ice at the highest level, but Clara had built her identity on defying expectations. She committed herself to years of grueling training, often waking before dawn to skate, then cycling for hours, blending the two sports into a punishing routine that tested her body and mind. With each practice, she grew sharper, stronger, more determined to achieve something extraordinary. By 2002, Clara's hard work paid off when she qualified for the Canadian speed skating team heading to the Salt Lake City Winter Olympics. This was the moment she had dreamed of since that day as a teenager watching the games on television, the moment when she could step onto the ice not just as a competitor but as someone who had fought her way back from darkness. In Salt Lake, she stunned the world by winning a bronze medal in the 5,000-meter event, proving that she was not only a dual-sport Olympian but a dual-medal winner across summer and winter games, a feat almost unheard of in Olympic history. For Canada, it was a moment of pride. For Clara, it was proof that her journey was only just beginning. What made her story even more powerful was not the medals themselves but the message behind them, that transformation is possible, that even those who come from broken places can rise to unimaginable heights with courage, determination, and belief in the possibility of change. After her breakthrough in Salt Lake City, Clara Hughes found herself standing at a crossroads. She had already done what most athletes could never dream of, winning medals in both the Summer and Winter Olympics, but deep down she sensed that her story was not yet complete. The bronze medal in speed skating was a symbol of her perseverance, yet it also lit a fire in her to push even further, to test the limits of her endurance and see how far she could carry the Canadian flag on the international stage. Returning home after Salt Lake, she immersed herself in an even more rigorous training program, determined to reach new heights. Her coaches marveled at her ability to tolerate punishing workloads that combined endless hours of skating drills with cycling sessions that would exhaust most athletes. Clara thrived in the grind, fueled not only by the desire to win but also by the deeper need to prove to herself that she could transform her hardships into strength. Behind her determination, however, the battle with depression still lingered quietly, like a shadow that refused to disappear no matter how brightly the spotlight shone. Clara often spoke later about how she felt both proud and empty at times, and how victories did not erase the inner struggles she carried from her past. Yet she was learning, slowly, that the same resilience that carried her through training could also help her begin to confront and heal those inner wounds. In 2006, Clara's perseverance culminated in one of the most unforgettable moments in Canadian Olympic history. At the Turin Winter Games in Italy, she entered the 5,000-meter race with immense pressure on her shoulders. It was the longest and most grueling distance in speed skating, requiring not just strength and technique but an almost superhuman mental focus. As she crouched at the starting line, the weight of years of sacrifice and struggle pressed down on her, but Clara had long ago learned how to turn pressure into fuel. Lap after lap, she skated with power and rhythm, her breath steady, her blade slicing through the ice with precision. With every stride, she seemed to draw not only from her training but from every challenge she had ever overcome: the instability of her youth, the loneliness of depression, the doubts of those who said she could not succeed. When she crossed the finish line and looked up at the scoreboard, it was clear: Clara Hughes had won the gold medal. The Canadian flag was raised, the anthem played, and tears streamed down her face as she stood on the podium, overwhelmed not just by victory but by the journey that had carried her there. She became the first Canadian woman ever to win a gold medal in speed skating at the Olympics, and her triumph inspired an entire nation. For Canadians watching at home, Clara was more than an athlete. She was a symbol of what it meant to rise, to keep going, and to believe in possibility no matter the obstacles. Her gold medal in Turin did not mark the end but rather a new beginning. Clara was now one of the most celebrated athletes in the country, but she also felt a responsibility to use her platform for something greater. She began opening up, little by little, about her struggles with depression, breaking through the silence that so often surrounds mental health. In a world where athletes are often portrayed as invincible, Clara dared to show vulnerability, admitting that even champions could suffer in silence. Her honesty struck a chord with countless people who had felt alone in their battles, and though she did not yet know it, she was laying the foundation for what would become one of the most impactful advocacy movements in Canadian history. But Clara's competitive spirit had not dimmed, and she continued to train with her eyes fixed on the 2010 Winter Olympics in Vancouver. Those games would be held on home soil, in front of Canadian fans, and the thought of skating in that environment filled her with both excitement and nerves. She knew it would be the final great chapter of her athletic career, and she wanted to give everything she had. The road to Vancouver was grueling. Clara was older now, competing against younger skaters in their prime, and injuries began to take their toll. Her body did not always respond the way it once had, and every training session felt like a battle between willpower and fatigue. Yet Clara refused to let age or pain define her. She pushed through with the same unbreakable determination that had carried her from a troubled teen to an Olympic champion. By the time the Vancouver Games arrived, she was ready not just physically but mentally, too, having embraced her role as both an athlete and an advocate. On February 23, 2010, she lined up once more for the 5,000-meter race, knowing it would likely be her last Olympic performance. The atmosphere inside the Richmond Olympic Oval was electric, with thousands of Canadians cheering and millions more watching across the country. Clara gave everything she had, skating with courage and heart, and when the race was done, she had captured the bronze medal. The crowd erupted in celebration, and Clara raised her arms in gratitude, soaking in the moment. It wasn't just about the medal, it was about finishing her career on her own terms, in her homeland, surrounded by the people who had supported her journey. That bronze in Vancouver brought her Olympic medal total to 6, making her the only athlete in history to win multiple medals in both the Summer and Winter Games. It was a record that symbolized not just versatility but an almost limitless capacity for reinvention. Clara Hughes had become a living testament to the idea that no obstacle, no hardship, no dark chapter in life was strong enough to define a person's destiny. Her story was no longer just about sport, it was about hope, resilience, and the possibility of change. When she retired from competition, Clara faced a new question: what comes after greatness? For her, the answer lay not in chasing more medals but in dedicating herself fully to the cause that had been growing in her heart for years, the fight to break the stigma around mental health. She had already begun sharing her story, but now she was determined to make it her mission, to use her fame not just for celebration but for transformation. Clara knew that her toughest races were no longer on the ice or the bike but in the conversations that could change lives. Right. When Clara Hughes stepped away from competitive sport after the Vancouver Games, she might have chosen to retreat quietly into retirement, satisfied with her incredible record of 6 Olympic medals and her place in Canadian history. But Clara was never someone content to simply rest on past victories. She understood that her journey had given her a platform, and she felt a deep responsibility to use it for something greater. She began speaking publicly about her long struggle with depression, breaking down barriers in a culture that often viewed mental health as a taboo subject. Clara's voice was powerful because it was authentic. She spoke not as an expert but as someone who had lived through darkness and come out the other side, and people listened. Canadians who had once cheered for her on the ice and the bike now saw her as a beacon of courage in a different arena. She reminded them that behind every smile, every success story, there might be unseen battles, and that it was okay to seek help, to admit vulnerability, and to share the truth of one's experience. Her openness inspired countless individuals to start conversations with their families, their friends, and their communities, planting seeds of change across the country. In 2011, Clara became the national spokesperson for the Bell Let's Talk campaign, an initiative designed to raise awareness and funds for mental health programs in Canada. She embraced the role with the same intensity she once devoted to training, traveling across the nation to meet people, share her story, and encourage others to open up about their struggles. Clara understood that ending stigma required more than speeches. It required connection, listening, and showing people that they were not alone. Her advocacy soon went beyond Canada's borders, earning her recognition as one of the world's leading voices in the mental health movement. Yet even as her public profile grew, she continued to ground her message in humility, reminding people that she was not special, that she was simply someone who had chosen to face her pain and transform it into purpose. In doing so, she gave others permission to believe they could do the same. Just as her Olympic victories had once lifted the spirits of a nation, her candor and compassion now began to lift hearts in a different, more lasting way. But Clara's post-athletic journey was not only about advocacy, it was also about adventure, challenge, and service. True to her restless spirit, she embarked on ambitious projects that combined endurance sport with social purpose. One of the most remarkable was her Clara's Big Ride for Bell Let's Talk in 2014, a cross-Canada cycling journey covering more than 11,000 kilometers over 110 days. Clara rode through every province and territory, meeting people in large cities and remote towns, spreading the message of mental health awareness everywhere she went. The ride was grueling, demanding long hours on the road through varying weather conditions, but Clara thrived in the challenge, fueled not by the pursuit of medals but by the stories of the people she met along the way. Each stop became an opportunity for conversation and connection, and thousands of Canadians joined her, whether by riding alongside her for a stretch, welcoming her into their communities, or sharing their own personal struggles. The ride was not just a physical feat but a national movement, showing what could happen when sport, purpose, and humanity intertwined. By the time she completed the journey in Ottawa, Clara had inspired millions and raised both awareness and funding for mental health programs, leaving a legacy far greater than any medal could symbolize. Clara's impact was recognized with numerous honors. She was named an Officer of the Order of Canada, inducted into Canada's Sports Hall of Fame, and celebrated not just as an athlete but as a humanitarian. Yet for all the accolades, she remained grounded, often retreating into nature to recharge. She loved cycling long distances through quiet landscapes, hiking in the mountains, and embracing the solitude that once might have frightened her but now brought peace. Clara spoke often about how sport had saved her life, but also about how healing came from service, from giving back, and from building a life rooted in meaning rather than medals. Her story became a blueprint for resilience, proof that a person could come from a place of pain and confusion, fall down many times, and still rise to become not only a champion but also a source of hope for others. In interviews and speeches, she emphasized that struggle did not mean weakness, that it was possible to carry both darkness and light, and that sharing our truth could help lighten the burdens of those around us. Today, Clara Hughes is remembered not only as one of Canada's greatest Olympians but also as a pioneer in mental health advocacy, a woman who dared to use her platform for change long before it was common for athletes to speak openly about such issues. Her journey from a troubled teenager on the streets of Winnipeg to a dual-season Olympic champion and national advocate is one of the most powerful testaments to the human spirit. She showed the world that resilience is not about never falling but about rising each time we do, stronger and wiser. For young athletes, she is an example of versatility and grit. For those battling mental illness, she is living proof that healing and purpose are possible. For Canada, she is a hero whose legacy goes far beyond sport. Clara Hughes's life reminds us that greatness is not only measured in medals but also in the lives we touch, the conversations we start, and the courage we summon to be honest about who we are. Her legacy continues to ripple across generations, inspiring people everywhere to face their challenges with courage, to chase their dreams with determination, and to never forget that even in the darkest moments, there is always a path toward light.